Welcome back to the Book Nook podcast. We are diving deep today. Today we're going deep into Jane Austen with Sense and Sensibility. And here's the twist. We're not just rereading it. We're going on a journey through different perspectives on this.
Yeah, it's like we're having a book club discussion right here, getting all those interesting aha moments from different readers.
Exactly. Think of it as a shortcut to being well-informed about this book, Sense and Sensibility, without having to read all the reviews yourself. Just, for those who haven't read it, it revolves around these two sisters, Elinor and Marianne Dashwood, navigating love and heartbreak.
And societal expectations in 19th century England.
Yeah, and it's brilliant how their names reflect their personalities.
Right.
Elinor represents sense, practical and composed, while Marianne represents sensibility, all about those emotions.
Yeah.
Austen uses this contrast to explore the many different approaches to life's challenges. Yeah, it's like she's setting up this social experiment.
Yeah.
With her writing, can sense and sensibility coexist, or are they destined to clash? Now let's jump into our first review. This one's from the Pine-Scented Chronicles. And the reviewer, Callback 4, actually started their Austen journey with Pride and Prejudice and found it kind of challenging at first.
It's a common experience with Austen. Yeah, her language and, the social context can take some getting used to, but you get hooked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this reviewer was drawn to Sense and Sensibility, because it's on all those best of romance lists.
Right.
And I think it deserves to be.
Yeah.
They were really impressed with how Austen just weaves in social commentary, especially about, money and relationships.
Yeah.
Back then, marriage was often seen as a way to secure financial stability. But the Dashwood sisters, they have a more nuanced view, a modern view, I'd say.
Absolutely. Austen uses her female characters in a subtle way to challenge the norms of that time.
Right.
And it's not just about, challenging societal expectations, but the reviewer really noticed the strong feminist undercurrent. In the novel, a lot of the male characters come across as weak or unlikable, highlighting the strength and resilience of the women.
Yeah, it's like she's flipping the script on typical romance tropes. Get these flawed men and then incredibly strong women.
Yeah.
Okay, listeners, if you're enjoying this deep dive, we'd love it if you hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. Helps other bookworms find our little nook. Now let's move on to our next book review.
All right, this one is from a blog simply titled Book Review, Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. And the reviewer starts off by comparing it to Bridgerton, calling it what Bridgerton tried to be, but with much more authenticity. They even mentioned going on a Jane Austen tour in England with their mother.
Oh, wow. That's dedication. A true Austen fan. What else do they say?
Well, they give a quick plot summary, but what stood out to them was all the walking in this book. They joked about renaming it The Guide to Walking by Jane Austen.
That's funny. It makes you picture those long walks, through the English countryside.
Yeah.
Having those deep conversations. But it sounds like they had some critiques, too.
Yes, they felt that this book, being one of Austen's earlier works, lacked some of that wit and charm, from her later novels. And they felt like the characters, while embodying sense and sensibility, could have been fleshed out a bit more.
I see their point. Austen's characters are so iconic, you just want more. Do they have any other observations?
Yeah, they thought the book dragged on at the end, like it was unnecessarily prolonged. They were ready for it to be over.
Okay, so we have 2 reviews now, and already we have contrasting opinions. That's the beauty of looking at it this way, a multifaceted view.
Yeah, it's about embracing those different ways that readers connect with the same text. Yeah. And it's only going to get more interesting as we move to our video reviews. You ready?
Absolutely. Let's hear what the YouTubers have to say.
Our first YouTube review is from Christine Eckert. And right away, she captures that feeling. When she describes Austen's books as cozy, it's like curling up by the fireplace with a warm cup of tea and just getting swept away.
Yeah, I love that you picked up on that word, cozy. It really does sum up the experience. Of reading Austen, right? Even though she tackles, some serious issues, there's this underlying warmth, that charm, that just makes you want to keep reading. So what did Christine think of Sense and Sensibility, specifically?
Well, she gave it 3 to 3.5 coffee cups. Out 4.
Okay.
Which puts it slightly below Pride and Prejudice on her list, but still a solid recommendation. She really connected with Elinor's quiet strength. That ability to stay composed and resilient, even when facing incredibly difficult situations.
Yeah, I can see why Elinor's, she's such a strong female character, but in this understated way. She's not loud or demanding, but she has this inner strength. allows her to handle anything. It's a quiet dignity that I think a lot of us can relate to.
And what I found insightful was how Christine emphasized the importance of recognizing different viewpoints within the novel. She reminded viewers that, we often don't have the full picture of what's happening in other people's lives. So it's important to be open to those different perspectives.
Yeah, that's a valuable takeaway, not just from the book, but for life.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that reminder to step outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
And try to understand where other people are coming from, even if we don't agree with them. It's empathy, passion.
Exactly. And it's something that Austen does so well in her writing. She presents this cast of characters, and they all have different outlooks, motivations, ways of experiencing the world. And by exploring these different perspectives, we get a richer understanding of human nature.
All right, let's move on to our final review. This one comes from the book Habit. And this reviewer had a really unique experience. They read the book first as a teenager and then reread it years later as an adult. And guess what? Their whole perspective on the book changed.
Oh, that's fascinating. It speaks to how our interpretations of literature can evolve as we grow and change.
Yeah.
As people, it's like a conversation.
Yeah.
Between the reader and the text, right? What changed for them?
They were really struck by the pace
and
the intrigue of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
And compared it to Pride and Prejudice, it's like they discovered a whole new layer to the story that they hadn't appreciated before.
It makes you wonder what we might miss on a first reading, especially when we're younger. As we get older, we bring different experiences, different perspectives, which allows us to connect with the story in new ways.
Yeah, like unlocking a secret door that was always there.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the key.
That's a great way to put it.
And that's why rereading can be so rewarding, right? It's not just revisiting a familiar story. It's about rediscovering it with fresh eyes. So what other insights did this reviewer have after rereading Sense and Sensibility?
They highlighted the effectiveness of contrasting Elinor and Marianne's personalities, seeing it as this brilliant narrative device. It allows Austen to delve deeper into the consequences of their choices. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Right.
Elinor, with her sense and practicality, makes choices driven by logic and social expectations, while Marianne, guided by her emotions, follows her heart, even if it leads to pain and disappointment. It's such a compelling dynamic, and it raises questions about which approach is ultimately more fulfilling.
And, to illustrate this point, the reviewer gives an example of Marianne's emotionally charged language, which so perfectly reflects her sensibility.
Yes.
Like you can hear her voice trembling with, passion and intensity in every word.
Yeah.
It's such a contrast to Elinor's more reserved tone.
It is.
I love that observation because it shows how Austen uses language to reveal her characters' inner worlds. And it's not just about contrasting personalities. It's about exploring different ways of navigating the world. Elinor's sense might seem like the more rational approach, but Marianne's sensibility, while messy at times, allows her to experience life more fully, with all its joys and sorrows.
And that brings us to what this reviewer admired most about Austen's writing, her ability to capture the nuances of human emotion and motivation. They praised her skill as an observer of human nature, and I couldn't agree more. It's what makes her characters so timeless and relatable.
Absolutely. Even though her books are set in a specific time, the emotions they explore, love, loss, heartbreak, societal pressures, it's universal. We still grapple with these same feelings today, and that's what makes Austen's work so enduring. It transcends time and speaks to the core of what it means to be human.
And the reviewer concluded by calling Sense and Sensibility one of Austen's best works, praising its enduring relevance due to its portrayal of these timeless human experiences.
So we've heard from 4 different reviewers now, each one offering their own insights and perspectives. What stood out to you across these reviews?
Well, I was struck by how all of the reviewers, regardless of their personal preferences, recognized Austen's masterful portrayal of societal norms and pressures, particularly as they relate to women in 19th century England. It's fascinating to see how those external forces shape the lives and choices of the characters. And it makes you think about, how those same pressures, that perhaps in different forms, still influence us today.
That's so true. We may not be bound by the same strict social codes, but there are still so many expectations and unwritten rules that shape our lives, especially as women. And I think Austen's work, it invites us to question those expectations and to consider what it might mean to live more authentically, even if it means challenging the status quo.
Exactly, and I think that's another reason why this book continues to resonate with readers today. It speaks to our ongoing desire for a more just and equitable society, where individuals are valued for their character and contributions, not just their social standing
Right.
or wealth.
Yeah. It's a reminder that true worth comes from within, not from external validation or societal approval. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Sense and Sensibility, what's one final thought-provoking question you would leave our listeners with? Something to ponder as they maybe consider picking up this classic or revisiting it with fresh eyes?
I would encourage listeners to reflect on the title itself, Sense and Sensibility. It's not either. True wisdom, as we've discussed, lies in finding a balance between those two forces. It's about being both pragmatic and passionate, using both our heads and our hearts to navigate life.
That's beautifully said. It's about embracing the fullness of who we are,
Yeah.
with all our contradictions and complexities. It's about recognizing that we don't have to fit into those neat little boxes defined by society. We can be both sensible and sensitive, logical and intuitive, grounded and dreamers.
And I think that message, that invitation to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, is what makes Sense and Sensibility so timeless, a work of art.
Well, on that insightful note, I want to thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Sense and Sensibility. It's been a joy exploring this classic tale with you, and I hope our listeners have come away with a renewed appreciation for Jane Austen.
The pleasure was all mine.
And listeners, if you've enjoyed this multidimensional journey through Sense and Sensibility, don't forget to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast. For more deep dives into fascinating books, and if you're feeling extra generous, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us spread the book love and connect with fellow bibliophiles. Thanks for listening to the Book Nook podcast, and be sure to check the link in the description to get your copy of Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah, it's like she's giving us this toolkit for navigating life, showing us different ways, and letting us decide what works best for us.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how Sense and Sensibility also critiques societal expectations, especially for women back then.
It's like she's encouraging us to question those norms and imagine a world where women have more agency, more freedom.
Exactly. And I think that's another reason why this book is still so relevant. That desire for a more just and equitable society where people are valued for who they are and what they contribute, not just their social standing. Right. It reminds us that true worth comes from within. So as we finish up our deep dive into Sense and Sensibility, what's one last question you'd leave our listeners with? Something to think about as they maybe pick up the book or reread it with fresh eyes.
I'd say think about the title, Sense and Sensibility. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about finding that balance,
right?
Being both pragmatic and passionate, using our heads and our hearts.
That's a great point. It's about embracing who we are with all our contradictions. And realizing that we don't have to fit in, into those boxes that society creates. We can be both sensible and sensitive, logical and intuitive, grounded, but also dreamers.
And that message that we can embrace the full human experience, that's what makes Sense and Sensibility so timeless.
Well said. On that note, I want to thank you for joining me for this deep dive. It's been a joy exploring Sense and Sensibility with you, and I hope our listeners have a new appreciation for Jane Austen.
It's been a pleasure.
And listeners, if you enjoyed this journey through Sense and Sensibility, don't forget to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast. We'll have more deep dives into great books. And if you're feeling generous, leave us a review. It helps other book lovers find us.
Thanks for listening to the Book Nook podcast, and be sure to check the link in the description to get your copy of Sense and Sensibility.